Today, Scottie Pippen is recognized as one of the great wingmen in NBA history, the beta to Michael Jordan's alpha on 6 Bulls title teams. But on draft day in 1987, he was still just a wing, and an obscure one at that. Having arrived at Central Arkansas as a team manager, Pippen somehow left as a lottery pick, one coveted and ultimately corralled by Bulls general manager Jerry Krause in a draft day trade with the Supersonics. But what if Seattle had kept Pip for themselves? Chris Miles plays out the possibilities.
Live at the Felt Forum in New York, the time has elapsed for Seattle picking 5th. Seattle got that 5th pick, by the way, in a trade with New York. Here's a recap of who's been selected so far. And gentlemen, it's a virtual complete basketball team, minus, say, a point guard.
In June of 1987, the Chicago Bulls and Seattle Supersonics were teams at crossroads. The Bulls had the league's best young player, Michael Jordan, but losing records in each of his first 3 seasons. The Sonics were coming off a surprising run to the Western Conference Finals, but still only won 39 games in the regular season, were at least a player away from contending.
The Seattle Supersonics select Scottie Pippen of Central Arkansas.
Pippen's story is really one of the more remarkable stories. He went to Central Arkansas on work study. He wasn't even on a basketball scholarship. As a freshman, he's handing out towels to the basketball players at Central Arkansas. I mean, who even knew they had a basketball team? So he eventually gets a scholarship.
I tell you the thing that's nice about him, too, and when you start to talk about a type of player, he can play a small forward, a big guard, a point guard. You know, it's interesting about him. He was recruited out of high school. He was 6'1", and he was recruited as a guard, and between his freshman and sophomore year, he grew 6 inches and is now 6'8".
I don't know if I was surprised that he was drafted over me, but I was disappointed. I knew my track record. You know, I was first team All-American, man. I was like, this guy's like an unknown. So I was disappointed, and more because I wanted to have an opportunity to play with Michael Jordan. I thought, you know, I played with him obviously in college at North Carolina.
There's still a whole lot that I have to learn about the NBA, and going in, I'm looking to go in and play probably the 3 position, but someday I want to be able to work my way into the point guard position.
I didn't know much about Scottie Pippen heading into the '87 draft because, you know, this is the era before YouTube and the internet that, you know, you can just Google and see someone play. So, you know, it was grainy footage. You heard that he had athleticism, but no one, except for Jerry Krause, really knew what this guy could be.
There was one tournament that he played very well in before the draft. That was the one that kind of solidified him with Jerry Krause's eyes. So he was a name, but again, he wasn't, nobody thought top 10.
Jerry Krause was in his 3rd season as Bulls general manager. The former scout first noticed Pippen's raw talent at a pre-draft camp a few weeks before the draft. Chicago had the 8th selection, but knew Pippen would be off the board by the time it picked. So Krause struck a deal with Seattle.
The following trade has been consummated between Seattle and Chicago. Seattle trades to Chicago the 5th pick, the rights to the 5th pick in the draft, Scottie Pippen, in exchange for the rights to the 8th pick in the draft, Olden Polynice.
The deal was the most important move Krause ever made as a GM. The athletic and rangy Pippen developed into an invaluable complement to Jordan and a Hall of Famer.
People forget, it was a big struggle for Michael. He was on losing side in 9 of his first 10 games. I mean, if a player now at that level was 1-9 in his first 10 playoff games, what would his reputation be? You know, it'd be like, he's not a winner, he's a loser.
Michael was a great on-ball defender, but he would have been worn down if he had to guard everybody. And that was the way it was heading, was that he was going to have to guard everybody. And he wouldn't have made it physically. He would have worn down, he would have broken down.
And this was Michael Jordan, but he's playing against Bird Celtics, you know, and Pistons with Isaiah and all those guys, and, you know, the Hawks with Dominique, Sixers with Dr. J. And I mean, the league in the 80s was loaded with great teams in the Eastern Conference. And so, you know, the guy's MVPs, Defensive Player of the Year, and he's getting knocked out in the 2nd round.
Michael was very demanding. You know, he pushed guys to be, not say be like him, but to reach a higher level than what you thought you could be. He put a lot of pressure on everybody.
I think Michael Jordan helped Scottie Pippen immensely. And what I mean is not just in terms of the physical, but I mean the mental toughness, because you could not If you weren't mentally tough, you couldn't play with Michael Jordan. He would destroy you.
It was always a big thing for Michael, you know, to trust someone. He didn't trust Brad Sellers, and there were a lot of guys he ran, Scott Burrell, and over the years, Rodney McCray. You know, you've had half dozen or more players that he ran off the team because he didn't demand they be traded or anything, got rid of, but he didn't have respect for him and he didn't trust him.
Scottie, Horace, you know, myself, B.J. Armstrong. I mean, we can go down the line. Every player that played with him, he pushed you. And it was, some people could handle it, some people couldn't. The guys who can handle it were on those championship teams. The guys who couldn't were on somebody else's team.
He destroyed a lot of guys who folded when he was on him. And he stayed on Scottie for years and years until Scottie finally developed the kind of mental toughness it took to play with Michael Jordan. And once he had that, the physical talents were blossoming as he came into his own. And he became a devastating player and a Hall of Fame player. Absolutely a Hall of Fame player.
Together, Jordan and Pippen led the Bulls to 6 NBA championships over 8 years. Stretch of dominance matched only by Bill Russell's Celtics. Olden Polynice, on the other hand, played 4 unimpressive seasons in Seattle before he was dealt to the Clippers in 1991. But what if the Sonics hadn't made that draft day deal with the Bulls and kept Pippen for themselves?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, those Seattle teams in those days were good teams. They were playoff teams. They weren't championship contending teams. They had some good players like Dale Ellis. It depends. See, this is where it sort of depends. Like, what did they think Scottie Pippen would have been?
It would have made my game a lot easier because you got one more guy on the floor that you got to pay attention to offensively. It was unfortunate I played with teams with some players that didn't command a double team.
2 years after trading Pippen, the Sonics drafted explosive power forward Shawn Kemp with the 17th pick in 1989. And a year later, Seattle selected Gary Payton, 2nd overall, a pick they received for trading backup center Alton Lister. So if the Sonics hadn't traded Pippen in '87, they might have had a big 3 of Kemp, Payton, and Pippen.
So if you can keep Scottie Pippen, Gary Payton, and Shawn Kemp together on the team and bring in some good support guys, yeah, I can imagine them winning easily.
Well, Payton and Jordan having some words, face to face, and Hopper guides Payton away. Now Shawn Kemp calming Gary Payton down.
Michael Jordan would have problems, you know what I'm saying? And then Shawn would have came in '89, 2 years later. I would have came 3 years later in 1990. That would have been a great crew. But I think Scottie would have put another dynamic together with us, and we'd have been cool.
That would have been nasty. I mean, if you go back and you look at that Sonics team, you put those 3 guys together, I mean, they're freakish athletes, or 2 of the 3 are freakish athletes. Kemp was off the charts. You know, I mean, you look at the guys today, Blake Griffin, all these guys that jump out of the gym, they got nothing on Shawn Kemp. And then you throw Scottie Pippen in there, who is just as a freakish athlete as Kemp. I mean, oh my goodness, they might have won some championships.
They say they keep him. Are they keeping him to be kind of a traditional small forward who doesn't really shoot a lot of threes because nobody really shot a lot of threes at the time? Or would they have been forward-thinking the way Chicago was, which is what, no, this guy can handle the ball. Let's let him bring the ball up. Let's let him press Magic Johnson 94 feet in the finals. Give him these really kind of new assignments for somebody his size. I don't know if they would have done that.
The mid-90s Sonics rotation might have looked something like this. Gary Payton at the 1, Hersey Hawkins at the 2, Pippen at the 3, Kemp at the 4, Sam Perkins at the 5, Nate McMillan and Detlef Schrempf coming off the bench.
We don't want to come in championships, I think, because Scottie would have turned it around for us a little bit. He would have been that guy that can guard the big guards, and I can guard the little guards. We can switch everything, the way we played. That's the way we played anyway. It would have been a big difference if he would have stayed, and I would have loved to play with him.
Gary Payton was a tough guy. I mean, he's, you know, in your face, you know, general type guy. I think Scottie would have played well with him because they both love to play defense. They're both 2 great defenders, and I think that would have really joined those 2 guys together.
They would have never gotten past the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls, that team, no matter how good they would have been. Because Michael was clearly head and shoulders above the elite players in the league. He was head and shoulders above the elite. So he was going to eventually win titles, regardless who was sitting in those seats.